one of the great enemies of profitability is rigidity, because I'm lucky when I switched to managing money by switching to the bond department at Citibank, and there couldn't be a bigger backwater at the time. They said, could you figure out what high yield bonds means and start a fund? And I found this area where everybody said, oh, no, we don't do that. Everybody. Most investment organizations had a rule against buying bonds that are rated below A or below triple B. And I'm buying single B bonds. And everybody says, no, we don't do that. Well, guess what? When you go to an auction and you sit down, take your seat, and you see there are no other bidders, that's usually a good thing. So the point is, open-mindedness was really the most important single theme of the memo, I think, along with continuing to evolve your thinking as you get older.
Can you take us back a little bit to that moment when you were starting to do high yield investing and nobody else was? I mean, I assume Milken wasn't active at this point in time.
No, Milken was. No, Mike had been interested in low-rated bonds, I think, all along. He got out of Wharton the same year I got out of Chicago, 1969. And I think that he immediately found, among other things, he wasn't dedicated to one area, but I think he found low-rated debt. And there's a famous book called Hickman, which talks about bond experience from 1900 to 1943. And supposedly Mike found that book, and he read in it that the lower a bond's rating was, the higher its actual rate of return was. Not its promised yield, but its realized total return. Because, yes, there had been some defaults and bankruptcies, and let's remember that that period included the Great Depression, but nevertheless, the excess yield you got as an inducement was more than sufficient to offset the credit losses. And that was like an aha moment for him. And at that point in time, it was impossible to issue a low-rated bond. They were called non-investment grade, speculative grade. You just couldn't issue them.
Oh, so the big banks weren't doing it.
Right. And the big investment banks, which is in those days was separate, the big underwriters. And let's remember that in Moody's manual, it defined a B-rated bond as follows: fails to possess the characteristics of a desirable investment. And when I teach classes about this, I say to them, let's go down to the street. I have a car there I don't need anymore, and you have money and you need a car. But hopefully, before you say whether you'll take it or not, hopefully you're going to ask me one question. What is that question?
I'm debating whether the question is what's the value of the car and what's the price of the car. But I want to know both.
But the value you can't ask me because I'm a seller.
Right. Okay. I want to know what the price is.
But you can ask me the price. Hopefully, before you say I'll take it or I won't take it, you know the price. But, in 1978, Moody's said these bonds are not proper for investment regardless of price.
Oh.
How can that be?
Well, the other thing that you say sometimes is, how can life insurance companies make money knowing that every single person's going to die?
That was one of my real epiphanies. Around 81 or 2, one of the first financial cable shows interviewed me, and the reporter said to me, how can you buy these bonds? Some of them are going to default. And this is one of those times when, you just get the answer. It pops into your mind. I'd never thought of it before. And I said, the most conservative companies in America are the life insurance companies. How can they insure people's lives when they know they're all going to die? And the answer is, number one, it's risk they're aware of. It doesn't come as a shock when somebody dies. Nobody breaks into the board meeting and says, hey, one of the people died. Number two, it's risk you can analyze. And so they sent a doctor to your house to see if you're in good enough shape to get a policy. Number three, it's risk you can diversify. So nobody insures just skydivers or just people who live on the San Andreas Fault or just smokers, but they diversify their book. Number four, it's risk they're well paid to take. So they look at me, they say, this guy's going to die at 90, and they price the policy on the assumption I'm going to die at 75.
There's your margin of safety.
Exactly. And I said, this is exactly what we do in high yield bonds. So we started doing it, and we made money steadily and safely, investing in the worst public companies in America. Now, remember my background. I joined the investment business September of 1969. I'd had a summer job in 1968, so I got to look at it. But in 1969, I went to work permanently at Citibank's investment research department. And the bank was what was called the Nifty 50 investor. The Nifty 50 were considered to be the best and fastest growing companies in America. Companies that were so good that A, nothing bad could ever happen, and B, there was no price too high.
This was the polar opposite of the not appropriate for investment.
Exactly. For the Nifty 50, there was no price too high. And for the high yield bonds, there was no price low enough. And of course, both stances are wrong. And if you bought the Nifty 50 the day I got to work, and if you held it tenaciously for 5 years, you lost almost all your money in the best companies in America for the main reason that they had been priced too high. The normal PE ratio for the S&P is 16 post-war. These things, a lot of them were selling between 60 and 90.
Gosh, I don't know any companies like that today.
Yeah.
Was it the case that they were not the best companies in America? Or was it the case that they were the best companies in America, but they were just priced too high to make sense as investments?
Some of each. They were all priced too high, but some, in addition, it was illusory. Let's go down the list. The granddaddy was IBM. The saying was, you can't be fired for buying IBM. Did IBM go bankrupt? Maybe, I don't remember. Close. Xerox was number 2. They completely lost their market to imports. They had to find a new business model.
The consumer companies and the tobacco companies were part of that too.
And for the most part, they did better. But I'll tell you one consumer company that didn't do well, and that's Simplicity Patterns. That was in the 50. You see a lot of people sewing their own clothes today? If so, you travel in different circles from me. But that was considered a company that could never be hurt. Maybe Sears was in there. I forget. But the concept of disruption was never considered. The moats were considered inviolate. The thinking was really simple. Nobody thought about the fact that if Xerox priced their copies at 30 cents a piece, somebody from abroad could produce it, and that presented a price umbrella that somebody else could get underneath. So in those days, the Wall Street Journal used to run a box on the first page whenever something would crap out, showing the losses in a certain category. And we had lots of companies where you lost more than 90% from the high to the low.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth? Who got the truth now?